Hello, I'm Bill Lawson, Executive Director of the Mahoning Valley Historical Society, and welcome to this month's edition of Bites and Bits of History, brought to you and sponsored by the John and Loretta Hines Foundation. News and updates. We are so happy to announce the long-awaited reopening of the Mahoning Valley Historical Society's facilities. Tyler History Center and the Ames Family Museum of Local History will both be open to the public again on Tuesday, July 6th, and we'll be returning to our pre-pandemic hours, which are Tuesday through Sunday, noon to 4 p.m. Watch for the MVHS Summer Family and Youth programs, which are called Hands-on History at Your Home, which will begin July 7th, and will be virtual activities every Wednesday through August 4th. And visit our website, mahoninghistory.org, for more information. I'm also happy to announce that our very popular History to Go program will start again on Saturday, August 21st, with the Amazing Race on Saturday. And it's the Amazing History Race, a scavenger hunt in automobiles throughout the local area. And watch for more information coming out on that as well. Today's program is very appropriate as we enter the summer months, and it's baseball in the Mahoning Valley, and our speaker will be Vince Guerrieri. Vince Guerrieri is a Youngstown native, and it's a town he's left without really escaping. He graduated from Chaney High School and spent his summers at home from Bowling Green State University, working for the Tribune Chronicle in Warren. He's an award-winning journalist who's worked in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Northwest Ohio, and his work has appeared in Politico, Ohio Magazine, Smithsonian.com, and Jalopnik. He's written 2 books on Ohio sports and contributed to 2 anthologies, including a Youngstown great, Car Bombs to Cookie Tables, which was put out by Belt Publishing. And so we're very happy to introduce Vince Guerrieri.
Hi, as Bill said, I'm Vince Guerrieri. I've been here a couple of times before to give presentations and a lot of times before to research on a variety of topics for fun and profit. And today I'm going to talk to you about baseball in the Mahoning Valley. Before I do that, I want to point out the tie I'm wearing. It's got diagrams of a lot of old-time stadiums. My mother bought it for me, and she will be thrilled to know that I am wearing it. And at some point, she will probably watch this presentation as well. All right, we will start off with the origins of baseball. The popular mythology is that the game of baseball was first played in Cooperstown, New York in 1839 by a man named Abner Doubleday. The problem with that is none of that statement is true. Abner Doubleday was already an adult, and documents have proven that he was well into his military career and was not even in Cooperstown, New York at that point. But, like Dutton Peabody said, the man who shot Liberty Valance, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. And it has really taken on this sheen of mythology. To this day, the Baseball Hall of Fame is in Cooperstown, and it is in Cooperstown because that was believed to be the birthplace of Major League Baseball. And when they used to play a Hall of Fame game for baseball, they played it at Doubleday Field. If you've ever watched The Natural, they're all wearing patches on their uniform. It is set in 1939, and they're all wearing patches, which Major League Baseball actually used for the centennial of baseball. But what is more likely, the city of Hoboken, New Jersey, which is also the hometown of Frank Sinatra, has laid its claim, and they have some evidence to back it up, that the game of baseball was first played there. The game had its origins in a variety of other stick and ball games. There are elements of cricket in it. There are elements of some other games related to that, but whatever its elements were, it took on a life of its own during the Civil War. The picture behind me is of soldiers playing it at a prisoner of war camp in North Carolina. So everybody kind of got a feel for the game and brought it back with them to their own homes. The origins of professional baseball, happily, are a little clearer. Everybody went back to their hometowns and started up baseball teams. And a lot of them were people who played on Sundays or whenever they had off time that they could go and do this. But in 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings started to hire players and pay them for playing the game of baseball. 1869 is regarded as the start of professional baseball. And it started up in what were at the time the two biggest cities in Ohio, Cincinnati and Cleveland. And in 1876, the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs was founded. And that has existed to this day in the form of the National League in Major League Baseball. Note the way that it is spelled, because up until about the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was baseball with two words. And what was really interesting is that, just like the name of the game evolved, the rules of the game itself evolved. It took a while before it got to the way that we know baseball. 3 strikes and you're out. The pitcher's mound is 60 feet 6 inches from home plate. The bases are 90 feet across, and you have 9 people on the field. So it really kind of took a while for the game to take that form. The modern, what is regarded as the modern era in baseball, started in 1901. Various leagues came and went throughout the late 1800s. The National Association, the American Association, the Union Association, and for one brief year the Players League, all came and went. But through it all, the National League kept on soldiering on. And in fact, through the 1890s, that was really the only major league that was playing, to the point where, if there was any kind of postseason, it was between the top 2 teams in the National League for something called the Temple Cup. Finally, in 1899, the National League contracted. They blinked out 4 cities, Baltimore, Cleveland, Louisville, and Washington, following the 1899 season. The Cleveland entry at that point was the infamous Cleveland Spiders, and you may have heard their name come up more recently as an alternative to the Indians. That the team is looking into changing its name, and that's been pitched as one of the alternatives. The Spiders were a team that started out in one of the other leagues and ended up going into the National League. They won a Temple Cup in 1895, played for another Temple Cup in 1896. But in 1899, when rules about team ownership were not as, let's say, as rigid as they would become, the people who owned the team in Cleveland also owned the team in St. Louis. And St. Louis allowed Sunday baseball. Cleveland did not. So what happened was the owners of the team took everybody worth taking and put them in the St. Louis team, and that Cleveland Spiders team of 1899 is still regarded as the worst ever assembled in Major League history. They went an astonishing 20-134. And what's even more amazing about that is 100 of those losses came on the road, because nobody wanted to come to Cleveland to play them because they wouldn't even make their travel expenses back in the trip. But the National League contracted a bunch of teams, and a guy by the name of Ban Johnson saw an opening. Ban Johnson was a Marietta native, newspaper man in Central Ohio, ended up becoming affiliated with what was then called the Western League, and it was a minor league. And they started playing in 1900 as the American League, and then in 1901 they started as a major league. And then in 1903 the first World Series was played, and that kind of ushered in the modern era of Major League Baseball, with the National League and the American League as the two major leagues. One of the key boosters in the American League was a guy by the name of Jimmy McAleer. Jimmy McAleer was a Youngstown native. He actually is the answer to a great trivia question. He played for Cleveland teams in the Players League, the National League, and the American League. He was a member of the what was then called the Blues fairly early on. It wasn't until 1915 that the American League team in Cleveland became known as the Indians. But he played for the Cleveland Spiders. He played for the Cleveland Blues, and he became a very important person in the American League in the early 1900s. He was a player. He was a manager. He was later an executive. He was actually part of two important firsts in Major League Baseball. In 1911, a pitcher by the name of Addie Joss died, and Addie Joss was a pitcher for the then called the Cleveland Naps in honor of Napoleon Lajoie. And after the team broke spring training, he was on the way up from the south, and he was feeling a little under the weather, and it turned out to be tubercular meningitis, and he died before the season started. And there were no pension plans for baseball players at that point, or really anybody else for that matter. So they said, we're going to play a game in his honor. And it was at League Park on the east side of Cleveland. If you will indulge me for a shameless plug, League Park has been renovated, and there is a little museum in the team and ticket offices at the corner of East 66 and Lexington. It is worth your time to visit if you are in the neighborhood. And they decided to play what was kind of a proto-all-star game. The Naps would take on a team of American League All-Stars, and Addie Joss was so beloved that all these American League All-Stars were more than willing to help out. Walter Johnson came from Washington. Ty Cobb came from Detroit. Ty Cobb actually lost his uniform on the way there. So if you see pictures of the team from the game, he's actually wearing a Cleveland uniform. But the manager of that all-star team was Jimmy McAleer, who at the time was the manager of the Washington team. A year later, as the manager of the Washington team, he invited President Taft to come to the game. And President Taft came to the game, and they said, we should do something ceremonial because the president is here. And they gave him a ball, and he threw out the first pitch from his box seat to McAleer. And that is the first presidential first pitch. Every president has done so since, except for Donald Trump. Every president has done so on opening day, except for Trump and Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter's only presidential first pitch was during the 1979 World Series between the Orioles and the Pirates. There is another presidential first that day, and this may be more myth than fact as well, but the story goes that Taft stood up between the top and the bottom of the seventh inning, and everybody thought the president's leaving, so we should stand up too. And they all stood up, and as it turns out, the president just sat back down to watch the rest of the game. And the story is that's where we get the seventh inning stretch from. Jimmy McAleer tried to extend his career by using the services of a man named Bone Ceteris. Bone Ceteris was a Welsh immigrant who worked in the mills, and he realized that he had a skill. He had actually learned it in the old country to help, manipulate muscles. He was sort of a neo-chiropractor. His nickname was actually a bit of a misnomer. He did not actually set bones in any way. And McAleer was one of his earliest patients, and he worked wonders on him. And so he kept referring other major leaguers to come and see him. Honus Wagner saw him. George Halas, who was obviously more famous as a football player and a coach, but did play for the New York Yankees, came and saw him as well. It was said that every cab driver in Youngstown knew how to get to Bone Ceteris' house. And he lived on Park Avenue right across from Wick Park. The house is still there, and it is apartments now, almost to Elm Street. Jimmy McAleer's other lasting contribution was he introduced Billy Evans to Major League Baseball. Evans was born in Chicago. Like Bone Ceteris, he was of Welsh origin. He ended up in Youngstown because his father worked for Carnegie Steel and ended up working at one of the Carnegie Steel mills. He went to Rayen High School when it was the only high school in the city. Among his classmates were Sam Warner of the Warner Brothers. He went away to Cornell with the idea that he would be a lawyer. He actually played baseball and football in high school and in college until he injured his knee. And his father died, and he was forced to come home and find a real job. And he went to work for the Vindicator. He was actually, I believe, the first sports editor of the Youngstown Vindicator. And he was kind of pulled into umpiring service. He was out to cover a game, and there was only one umpire. There was no umpiring crew at that point. And the umpire didn't show up, and Billy Evans started umpiring, and he realized he could make more money as an umpire than he could working for the Vindicator. And McAleer ended up being impressed with him after he acquitted himself well in an incident at, I believe it was a game in Niles, where there was a fight, and he kept a cool head and kind of made sure that that order was restored relatively quickly. McAleer advised Van Johnson that there was an umpire in Youngstown that he might be interested in. And Billy Evans, to this day, is the only major league umpire never to umpire a day in the minors. He had a 20-year career. He continued to do some writing for various news services while he was an umpire, and then he took on a second career as a sports executive. He was general manager of the Indians. He was the first general manager of the Indians. There was usually people who had duties that we would call general manager type duties with transactions and contract signing, but he was the first person to have that title. And he also worked as a scouting director for the Red Sox, and he was general manager for the Tigers for a while. And he was actually, for a year, he was general manager of the Cleveland Rams of the NFL. Another guy who ended up in the Youngstown area was Harry Stevens. He was an English immigrant who came to New York, and he said he went into a train station and says, I want to go to Niles. I have friends there. I told I can get a job at a steel mill there. And the guy behind the counter said, Niles, Michigan or Niles, Ohio? And Harry Stevens thought for a minute, and he didn't know, and he says, Ohio, I guess. And that's kind of how he ended up in Niles, Ohio. The mill closed. He was selling books throughout Ohio, and he went to Columbus, and he sat down and he watched a baseball game, and he had no idea what was going on, none. And he called for one of the programs, and he got a program, and he went through it, and he said, well, this doesn't help me. And he went to the owners of the team and said, I want to make a program for you, and I'll do it for, I can't remember what it was. He says, I'll split the profits with you 50-50. And the general manager and the ownership of the team couldn't be bothered with it. And they said, listen, if you can come up with $500 seed money, you can do it yourself. And so he beat the bushes, and he came up with the money by selling ads in the scorecard. And he pretty much invented the modern scorecard. If you've ever been to a ball game, it looks pretty much the same as it did when Harry Stevens first invented it. And he went from there into concessions. He sold a lot of things for a lot of events, but eventually he settled on what has become the standard bill of fare at ball games: beer, pop, hot dogs, popcorn, occasionally ice cream. He owned thousands of acres in Virginia where the peanuts were grown, and it was said that he was the only man to parlay a bag of peanuts into $1 million. And Harry Stevens was in New York City for the remainder of his career, but he kept a map of Trumbull County up on the wall pretty much until the day he died. And he's actually buried here in Niles, and there's a park named for him, and they have a hot dog day every summer. The major leagues started to shake themselves out. There were 16 teams between the American and National Leagues, 8 in each league, and there were some cities that had more than one team. Obviously, Chicago still has the Cubs and the White Sox. New York had the Giants and what were called the Highlanders, eventually the Yankees, and the Brooklyn Dodgers as well. Philadelphia had the Phillies and the Athletics. So there weren't a whole lot of cities that had Major League Baseball. And so as a result, there were a lot of independent teams that sprung up, and that was kind of the way that we got the minor leagues. Other cities wanted baseball, and it ran the gamut. There were bigger cities that just did not happen to have a major league team that eventually would have a major league team, like Minneapolis, like Baltimore. But there were also smaller cities that would never, ever, ever get a major league team for any reason, like Youngstown. And as a result, as these teams kept springing up, these leagues started springing up too. Some of them lasted for a long time. The American Association, I said, was at one point a major league, but it lasted as a minor league for many, many years. The Pacific Coast League out on the West Coast was a very significant and important minor league as well. But what really happened more often than not is you had these loose confederations of, let's say, a half a dozen or a dozen teams within what we would now consider less than a day's drive, but at the time were a relatively short train ride for these teams to go to. And they were all largely independent. The original owner of the Indians was a guy by the name of Charles Summers, and Summers owned the Indians, and he also owned a bunch of minor league teams. He owned part of the team in New Orleans. He owned part of the team in Toledo, and he actually started to set up a proto-farm system. But he was undone by financial problems in the early 19-teens and ended up having to sell off most of his holdings. Summers was the guy who ended up selling Shoeless Joe Jackson from the Indians to the White Sox. And that to me is one of the great what-ifs of Major League Baseball history. If Shoeless Joe Jackson had stayed with the Indians, would they have won more than the one World Series they did in that era? Would he have been part of a big fix? Because the Black Sox were not the exception. There were widespread allegations of sports figures and gamblers working together. There were widespread allegations of game fixing, and they stumbled on the World Series fix because of a grand jury in Chicago that was investigating fixes of regular season Cub games. Another player from the Mahoning Valley was Red Ames. He was a Warren native, and he started his pro career in Zanesville. Again, there were all these town teams that started up, and they would join these minor leagues, and a lot of them would float in and out of existence. He ended up playing most of his years for the Giants, but he also played for the Reds and the Cardinals. And the Giants at that point were the preeminent team, not just in the National League, but really in Major League Baseball. We tend to think of the Yankees now as the powerhouse in Major League Baseball, but at the time, the Yankees were actually the other team that played in the Polo Grounds, which was the Giants' home stadium. After his playing career, he returned to his native Warren, and he actually died young. I believe he was in his early 50s when he died as a result of lung problems related to the inhalation of some dangerous chemicals at the plant that he worked at. Again, we were in an era where there aren't a whole lot of workplace protections like there are today, and there was no pension plan for Major League Baseball. So not only did most players have to get a job after their career outside of baseball, there were a lot of players that worked in the off season just so they could continue to make money. I spoke of Addie Joss earlier. He actually had a job working for one of the newspapers in Toledo. He was their sports editor. In addition to minor league baseball, there was also a lot of amateur baseball in the Youngstown area in the early 20th century. Their initial home would have been right field. That's right with a W. And right field was over by St. Elizabeth's Hospital on the north side, not that far from the Westlake housing. And a circuit would grow up. A lot of pro sports have their roots in industry. The NBA is probably the best example of this because they started with a lot of company industrial basketball teams. But it was also true with amateur baseball in the area. There were actually enough steel mills here that every mill had its own team and they could form their own league. And here we have a picture of the Youngstown district baseball team from Carnegie Steel. After right field, there was a lot of baseball played at Idora Park, both amateur and professional. Idora Park obviously was built as a trolley park at the end of the Park and Falls Railway line, and it opened in 1899. Very, very humble origins, and it grew up into this large amusement park, Youngstown's $1 million playground, as it was called. And there was a baseball diamond there, and when companies had their company picnic, they would have a game there. But at the same time, there were a lot of professional games there. One of the things, again, that's kind of difficult to fathom in this day and age is that baseball teams played in-season exhibition games. They would barnstorm during the regular season if they had an off day. The Chicago Cubs played a game in Marion in 1920 while Warren Harding was doing his front porch campaign for president. Babe Ruth played in Cleveland. The Yankees played in Cleveland in 1921 one day, and then the next day went down to Akron and played against the Firestone team. So there were a lot of major league teams that would come through and would play an exhibition game at the baseball diamond at Idora Park. There were also a lot of Negro League teams that would play there. Moses Fleetwood Walker was a Steubenville native, attended Oberlin College, and played for the Toledo team of the American Association in 1884. In fact, if you've ever been to a Mud Hens game at their current stadium, Moses Fleetwood Walker Street is one of the streets that borders the stadium. And Cap Anson, who is another well-regarded baseball player, but probably less well-regarded human being, says, "I am not playing baseball with a black guy." And a gentleman's agreement was put into place. There was no codified rule in black and white that baseball was only for white players, but strangely enough, no black players ever seemed to get signed by major league teams. And they would play, so they would form their own leagues, and those teams would come through and they'd play games as well. They would play games wherever they could. Teams would set up in major cities like Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Cincinnati or New York or Chicago, and they would try and go basically wherever they thought they could get a crowd and earn back their travel expenses. Also, after the season, some players would put together their own barnstorming tours. Babe Ruth was a good example. Lou Gehrig was a good example. Bob Feller would actually do that in the 1940s, and he did a barnstorming tour after the season with a collection of Negro League All-Stars led by Satchel Paige. And this was before the two of them were teammates on the 1948 Indians. The Indians played a game at Idora Park on Billy Evans' Day in 1931. They were so thrilled that Billy Evans was the general manager of the Indians at that point, and they were so thrilled that a guy from Youngstown had made so good for himself that the Indians came down and had a game against a local team that was kind of put together. Also, the St. Louis Browns played at Idora Park when their minor league team was affiliated there. And this is when, like I said, in the 1910s, a lot of the minor league teams operated independently. They would make their money by selling players to teams that were higher up in the minors, and obviously, if they were high enough in the minors, they would make their money selling players to major league teams. Branch Rickey, an Ohio native, is probably best known as the guy who signed Jackie Robinson for the Dodgers, as played by Harrison Ford in '42. But prior to that, he was an executive with the St. Louis Cardinals, And he started bringing together these teams under the ownership of the Cardinals and kind of gave rise to the minor league farm system, which we now know today. At the time, it went all the way down to Class D baseball, but now it's pretty much AAA, AA, and A ball for the minor leagues. Of course, he was able to do this during the Depression, which meant there were a lot of minor league teams that were looking for whatever financial help they could get. And if that meant, a major league team bought a piece of them, then so be it. One of the prominent minor leagues throughout Ohio is the MidAtlantic League. And they started in the 1930s, and there were teams in Youngstown pretty much until the league ended in 1951. The teams changed based on who the affiliate was. At one point, they were the Browns because they were an affiliate of the St. Louis Browns. At one point, they were the Athletics because they were an affiliate of the Philadelphia Athletics. They were also known variously as the Colts or the Gremlins. And the teams, all the teams went on hiatus during World War II. A lot of minor leagues closed down, and actually, that was the era that the Cleveland Rams suspended operations for a year, and the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to survive only by combining with other teams. They combined with what was then the Chicago Cardinals for a year, and they combined with the Philadelphia Eagles for a year. The game came back, but minor league interest was starting to decline. And the reason for that, as you might suspect, is television. Once televisions were becoming more widespread, people could sit in their own living rooms and watch Major League Baseball and drink their own beer and eat their own snacks, as Bill Veeck famously once said, and didn't have to worry about going to a minor league team where you were watching maybe one guy who was going to be a major league player and a bunch of other guys who were going to be selling insurance within 5 years. And a lot of minor leagues folded, and that included the MidAtlantic League. The Youngstown team left for Oil City midway through the 1951 season, and then the team and the entire league folded after that. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of famous ball players from the area. Obviously, we can't have this conversation without George Shotgun Shuba. And hopefully next month I'll see a whole bunch of you down by the amphitheater when they finally dedicate the statue in his honor. George Shuba was a native of the west side of Youngstown, right across from Calvary Cemetery, actually. And he graduated from Chaney High School, played a lot at Bortz Field, which is now named for him. Went to a minor league tryout, or went to on the south side at Shady Run Field, and ended up signing with the Dodgers. He bounced around in their minor league system for a while. He played in Mobile, Alabama, and later on, a Mobile native named Hank Aaron said that George Shuba was one of his favorite players to watch as a kid in Mobile. He played most memorably in the minor leagues in Montreal. He was a teammate very briefly in Montreal with Jackie Robinson, and Jackie Robinson hit his first minor league home run, and George Shuba was the guy waiting at home plate to shake his hand, and that is what the statue is going to be. He later met up again with Robinson in the major leagues with the Dodgers. Shuba played in the late 1940s and 1950s for the Dodgers in Brooklyn, one of the famed Boys of Summer. And if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. Another famous baseball player from the Youngstown area is Bill White. He was a Warren Harding graduate and attended Hiram College. And Leo DeRocher signed him for the Giants when they were still in New York. He ended up playing most of his career with the Cardinals and the Phillies. He was actually on the Cardinals team that won the World Series in 1964. Another book recommendation, October 1964 by David Halberstam. He also played for the Phillies, ended up being the first black baseball broadcaster with the Yankees, and served for a while as president of the National League. And I believe his presidency of the National League coincided with Dave Dravecki's time in baseball. He was a Boardman native, went to YSU, was actually drafted by the Pirates. Not a lot of people know that. He was drafted by the Pirates, and he was thrilled because in Boardman he grew up as a Pirates fan. They ended up trading him to San Diego. He debuted with the Padres. He was part of the Padres team that won the pennant in 1984, lost the World Series to the Tigers. Ended up in San Francisco shortly after that, played for the Giants. He was on the Giants team in 1989 when they went to the World Series. That, of course, was the World Series that was interrupted by the earthquake. But he was diagnosed with cancer, and they found the tumor in his pitching arm, and he went through lengthy treatments and ended up making a comeback. Unfortunately, it was a relatively brief comeback. Actually, in one of his first outings back, he broke his arm while throwing a pitch. All the treatments had taken a toll on his bones, and he broke his arm. And that kind of put the end to his major league career. He actually ended up having the arm amputated, and he's still around. He's a Christian, and he is a motivational speaker. And I don't know if this story is true, but I really want it to be true. Apparently, at one point he was at a celebrity golf outing, and they asked him what his handicap was, and he said, "Well, I'm down to one arm right now." For years and years and years, there were ideas that minor league baseball would return to the Mahoning Valley, and they knocked around plans in the 80s and 90s. Obviously, Mickey Monos and John Antonucci, Mickey Monos of Farmore and John Antonucci of Superior Beverage, were the original owners of the Colorado Rockies when the expansion team was formed, and there was talk that they would be able to put a minor league team in Youngstown. Unfortunately, that's not the way things shook out. Youngstown actually was in the mix for the team that ended up first in Canton and now in Akron as the Rubber Ducks. The idea was for a downtown stadium where the Covelli Center is now. Ultimately, in 1999, the area became home to the Mahoning Valley Scrappers. The field was built out by Eastwood Mall. It was originally Cafaro Field. Now, obviously, it is Eastwood Field. And you were able to see a whole lot of Indians talent come through before they made it big. Shane Bieber was there. The first opening day pitcher was CC Sabathia. Lindor was there. Jose Ramirez was there. But minor league baseball changed last year in regards to their agreement with Major League Baseball. And the New York Penn League ceased to exist. And so now the Scrappers are still playing, but they're playing as part of what's called the MLB Draft League. So none of the teams are affiliated with major league teams, individual major league teams, and they play with the idea that this makes them more valuable as a draft candidate. We end now with one of my favorite pictures. It's minor league. It's Clyde Singer. Clyde was for many, many years the artist in residence at the Butler Art Institute. Wrote a Sunday column for the Vindicator, and this painting was of a minor league game at Idora Park. I would, at this point, this is where I would ask for questions, but obviously you are all on a different plane of existence from me, so you can please get in touch with the History Center if there is anything that you really need to know, or if you want to tell me how good this presentation was, or if you want to tell me how bad this presentation was. Thanks for your time.
Next month, on Thursday, July 15th, we have a very, very special edition of Bites and Bits of History. It's called Youngstalia, Italian Foodways in the Mahoning Valley, and it will be presented virtually all the way from Italy. Anthony Dion Mitzel, an adjunct professor of linguistics, language, and culture at the University of Bologna, Italy, and executive council member for the Italian American Studies Association, will be our presenter. Now, he lives in Italy, but he's a Mahoning Valley native, and he's going to provide a very unique look at this transatlantic exchange of culture. So, hope to see you then.